So, originally I wasn't going to make this. As most of you probably already know, the final trailer for the final Star Wars movie, at least the so-called Skywalker saga, as Disney has started referring to it as, has finally come out. And can we be honest, there's really no hype for this movie. There is no interest at all being generated about this film. No one's anticipating it. No one's interested in going to see it. I mean, I'm sure it will still make money. It's the Star Wars movie. But it's going to mostly be people who are going to the movie theater anyway for the holiday season, and they'll see Star Wars. Or at least the Disney version of it. So originally I was not going to make this. However, there has been some interest in exactly how bad this film is expected to be. Personally, I don't think Disney will allow The Rise of Skywalker to be as bad as The Last Jedi. So I think actually people who are interested in just seeing how bad it is will be disappointed. Ironically, they actually hurt the movie in the end. Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams are not going to allow the movie to be good. Disney is not going to allow the movie to be terrible, so we're going to get a mediocre movie that leans towards bad. At least that's my prediction. In fact, J.J. Abrams tried to release a bad movie, publicly stating that most people will dislike how the movie ends. The top brass at Disney flipped out, and they made him reshoot it until most people will like it. Anyway, I have watched a couple trailer breakdowns, and I had some thoughts of my own about the various scenes that no one else seemed to touch on. So here they are. I'm not going to go over every scene, as a lot of them is not that much to say. Now, I'm not going to actually play the video. This is due to YouTube's bungling of copyright law and issues. It is what it is. Do not blame me. So I'm just going to show still frames. The first picture here, many people think is evocative of Endor. Personally, I tend to agree. A lot of people miss, oddly, the helmet that falls in the ground in front of you is very reminiscent of an Endor trooper's helmet, a Rebel Endor trooper. My brothers actually owned the action figure when I was a kid, so I definitely recognize that this helmet, I'm not necessarily sure if it's identical, and I really can't be bothered to double check, but it's definitely meant to resemble it. And personally, I think it's an excellent way for this trailer to begin, for our purposes. The Rise of Skywalker is going to heavily lean on nostalgia in an attempt to get the fans that it lost in Last Jedi. So right out of the gate, an indoor scene and an object reminding you of an item from, in this case, Return to the Jedi, but the original trilogy. So I've noticed several people point out the forest, but no one seems to have noticed the helmet, which is a little bit odd. Now, the second scene shows her leaping across a chasm. Presumably, this is the same location, roughly. This is still Endor, where she just dropped the helmet and is now running and jumping. I only mention this scene because of the transition that then switches her to being inside this mechanical structure or ruins. A lot of people think that this is the inside of the Death Star, or its remains on the forest moon of Endor. This is possible, but I'm actually inclined to think this is a flashback to Jakku and the Star Destroyer graveyard. I think, also given some of the voiceover dialogue in this scene in the trailer, this is meant to imply that Rey has had pre-training in the Force. That she doesn't need that much training from Luke Skywalker or Princess Leia because of all the things she already did living a life as a scavenger on Jakku, or Janku, or however you say her homeworld's name. I could be wrong, but the impression I got from this scene was it's trying to imply that she's a Force adept. Now, this is a real thing in Star Wars. There are characters who never became Jedi or Sith, but did learn how to harness the Force. We basically see two examples of this in The Phantom Menace. Now, one is a woman, an alien, who you only briefly see during the pod races, and she's just watching. There's a quick scene there. She is, and it's gone. But in George Lucas's Star Wars, every character has a backstory. And this woman is actually, I believe she's a bounty hunter of some kind. And she is a Force adept. She has learned how to use the Force in very small, limited ways, but without any formal training. The second example of this is Anakin Skywalker himself, able to pod race, the only human who can do it, because he's been able to use the Force to some small degree, despite receiving no training whatsoever. I think this here is meant to harken back to that. It's showing Rey in small ways using the Force as she scavenges the Star Destroyer graveyard. Now, maybe I'm way off base here, but one of the many complaints about Rey is that unlike Luke, who we see training on the Millennium Falcon under Ben, and then later, for an indeterminate amount of time, we see being trained by Yoda on Dagobah, Rey is not really shown doing any much in the way of training. A few short clips, but not really much is happening, and it's suggested that very little time has passed, unlike the Dagobah scenes. Most people, like I said, all think this is the Death Star, and Rey's repairing it or something. I don't know. Maybe they're right, maybe I'm wrong, but my feeling was this is actually a flashback to before The Force Awakens. This scene, again, shows the nostalgia that they're leaning on. You can see Billy D. Williams' character, Lando Calrissian, in there towards the center of the group. There's even 3PO standing about 3 people or so behind him. And this scene is just, again, very evocative of other Star Wars scenes, particularly Princess Leia with the pilots. I don't know what this scene's necessarily about. I can't tell. Maybe he's standing under the Falcon there. But I think it's meant to just be evocative of that sense of nostalgia. This sort of looks like a scene from the original trilogy. And that's all the scene is meant to be. It's meant to look like that. Many people, if not most, were hoping that Rose Tico character would not return for this movie, being that she basically is the Jar Jar Binks of The Last Jedi. And it's interesting to note that her character has been pulled from most advertisements and most toy lines. But this does seem to be confirmation she is going to appear in the movie in some capacity, even if it's just a brief cameo. Also behind her, you can see 2 Resistance troopers, a male and female. The male, I don't remember the actor's name, but he is the actor who played Pippin in Lord of the Rings, who is kind of famous for his cameos. I feel bad for the poor guy. I think he's actually a great actor. I'd love to see him in a starring role at some point. But it seems like he only pops up in these other blockbusters as sort of a background, mostly cameo character. Still sort of cool to see him. Pity he's been dragged into this, though. Now, this is, a lot of people believe, is another indoor scene, which is certainly possible, and believe that that's Rey there, the lightsaber, is on the ruins of the Death Star. Again, this is possible, but this doesn't look like that to me. Now, maybe it's the ruins of the Death Star behind her, or just some crashed starship. But this looks like a seawall. I mean, that's awfully level and awfully wallish with a perfectly placed turret on it. I mean, what part of the Death Star is this exactly? And that it landed here and landed so perfectly stable. Again, you can't really tell from the still clip, but from what they show in the trailer, despite the waves crashing around, the wall isn't like, like you'd think it'd be like a ship or something, kind of bobbing and weaving, with the flow of the water. And it appears to be perfectly stable. Now, maybe it's just that heavy. I mean, the Death Star was the size of a small moon, which again means it wasn't that much smaller than Endor. So I would think the ruins of the Death Star, if it crashed in any sizable chunk, would be massive. It would probably knock Endor off its orbit. I mean, that is considerable weight being added to the planet. Being added to the moon. Which that makes me inclined to think that this is something that was built maybe around that wreckage behind it to keep people away from it. Again, very well that remnants of the Empire or the First Order themselves could have maybe secured this area. For, again, assume that's the Death Star or whatever ruins it is. So I'm inclined to think that she's standing on a seawall of some kind. Again, I've not really seen anyone else suggest that. And here's Kylo Ren. And here's the problem with this. And again, this isn't meant to be critical of the actor in any way, but it's really why he should not run around without his helmet on. Not that his helmet's really all that great either, mind you. But they really should not have removed his helmet in the first movie. And he really actors love to have as much face time as possible. But this is an example of where that's bad. It's to the detriment of the movie that we keep seeing Kylo Ren's face. He just doesn't look threatening. He looks like he belongs in a CW TV show with teens and young adults, talking about their love lives. He just looks kind of silly. Now, maybe if he was a little bit older, had more time for his face to mature, maybe if he had a better director than J.J. Abrams or Rian Johnson, but he just doesn't look intimidating. He doesn't look scary. I mean, I guess anyone with a lightsaber is someone you want to be wary of. At least they start chopping limbs off. But, I mean, he's just not someone I find threatening in of himself. And I don't think anyone else does either. I mean, Kylo's biggest fans are fangirls who are fangirling about how, smoldering hot he is. That's no one. It's not like Darth Vader or Darth Maul or, Boba Fett or Jango Fett. Cool bad guys that everyone likes and wants to dread. Kylo Ren is kind of, again, I don't mean to the actor. I think actually the actor does as best he can with the role. But Kylo Ren looks kind of dorky. Very much comes off not as a spiritual replacement to Darth Vader, but as a Darth Vader fanboy who doesn't realize he's in over his head. Here's what appears to maybe be an iceberg in space. It's a bit hard to tell. It's got a weird sort of reflection look. So I'm not positive if it's in outer space or if it's on an ocean somewhere. I think it's in space. Someone even suggested it might be a frozen cloud city, given that Lando's in here. But it is actually kind of a cool scene, which J.J. Abrams is able to deliver a cool looking scene. That is kind of the one thing he is good at. Like Michael Bay with explosions. The explosions look nice. You can't argue with that. And that's why he does them so often. It's got a bunch of first order TIE fighters. They look less nice, but I mean the scene itself still looks kind of cool. I'll give it that. Here is the Emperor's chair, presumably. Now, what some people miss, because you had some people going around saying that the Star Wars saga, the Skywalker saga, already ended. It ended at Return of the Jedi. That was the end. But a lot of this missed that George Lucas always intended for there to be 3 more episodes. That was always part of the plan. In fact, originally, Luke's sibling wasn't supposed to be Leia and wasn't supposed to be revealed in Return of the Jedi. That was meant to continue on into the next trilogy, the next 3 episodes. But Lucas just wasn't sure he'd ever get around to making those episodes. He intended to make them, but he wasn't sure he would. So he decided to wrap up that loose thread in Return of the Jedi, just in case he never got to make those final 3 episodes. According to rumor, which Dark Horse Comics actually expanded upon, George Lucas did intend the Emperor to return in some form. Now, it's not 100% clear how the Emperor will return. Dark Horse Comics actually made a comic book trilogy based off of what supposedly George Lucas intended the next 3 films to be about, which Lucas kind of married the original trilogy with the prequel trilogy by having a clone of the Emperor. Again, harking back to the Clone Wars. And this clone of the Emperor would take command of the Imperial remnants and fight against the New Republic. Now, whether the clone somehow had the memories of Palpatine, which again you don't get by cloning, but maybe there's some sort of esoteric technology that could copy and transfer Palpatine's memories. Maybe he regularly updated it. Or maybe it's some sort of Force thing, or maybe Palpatine's Force ghost was going to be advising his own clone. We've never seen Force ghosts of Sith Lords. However, the books, comics, and video games have featured them. They're not as common as Jedi Force ghosts, but according to the expanded universe, they are possible. Whether Lucas would have further canonized that by having it in his film or not, who's to say? He's never going to make them now, it seems. But regardless, here is Emperor Palpatine's chair. It is big, black, and spiky because Game of Thrones. That had a big, black, spiky throne. That was popular, at least before the final season. And so now all thrones are going to be Game of Thrones-ish, probably for the next decade or so. Here's what appears to be a Star Destroyer, possibly a regular Imperial, not a First Order one, but a true Star Destroyer rising up out of the ocean. Again, is this the same ocean as before? Is it a different ocean? I don't know. Supposedly, however, the Emperor in Rise of Skywalker has a fleet of Star Destroyers with Death Star tech, meaning that they all possess a super laser cannon capable of destroying a planet. Now, it's not clear if they can do this independently or much like the species 8472, if I'm getting that right, from Star Trek Voyager, where several ships can come together and cooperate as a group to channel their laser cannons together to form a super laser and blow up a planet. I don't know. But it looks like possibly his fleet is hidden under the ocean. And here's one of them rising up out. Again, it's a cool looking scene. That's about all it is. This is, again, very much a nostalgic scene. Here is the Millennium Falcon in front of a fleet of starships. Again, this is the Resistance, not the Rebels, which kind of accounts for why they don't necessarily look that much like Rebel ships for the most part. Some people have been suggesting that they are ships from the various Disney Star Wars TV series. But again, nobody really cares. None of those series were really any good. About Clone Wars, about the only good Star Wars TV series there's been, and even that was only kind of so-so. So even if they are, it's because J.J. Abrams was able to save some money by not inventing a new ship design and just copying the existing one that already fit the Star Wars aesthetic. That's all it is. This scene is in here deliberately as well. Again, it's nostalgic. Many people complain we never got to see Han, Luke, Leia, Chewie, and Lando. Many people forget Lando. Yes, he's not in the first A New Hope, but he is in the other two, and he's just as important as the other characters. But we never got to see them together in the cockpit of the Falcon. So here's all the new characters, plus Chewie and 3PO, in the cockpit in that kind of scene. It's not the characters we care about. It's the Disney knockoffs. But again, it's meant to kind of twinge that nostalgia factor. This seems to be the seawall from earlier. Maybe it's Death Star wreckage. It's possible. It does look like a circular structure here. Maybe this is supposed to be the super laser cannon. That sort of concave crater-like formation that, fired the super laser that destroyed planets and such. That could be what it is. Like I said, it's incredibly stable and incredibly intact and fell perfectly, if that's the case. But like I said, I just don't know. Again, to me, this doesn't even really seem to be the same color as the Death Star. Again, 20, 30 years of sea damage could account for that, perhaps. Now, this here does look like Death Star wreckage. It's not perfectly flat. And it definitely looks like something that seems to have more rubble to it, which the previous seawalls didn't. So I could easily believe that this is a Death Star here, possibly part of the super laser. Is that sort of concave curve going on there. Maybe it could be part of the trench. I don't know. This is a scene of 3PO saying goodbye, and this made all the Star Wars fans mad, as he refers to the Disney knockoff characters as his friends, despite the fact that most of the movies he's barely exchanged 2 words with any of them. Doesn't really have a connection with any of them. But I do think this is at least meant to suggest that 3PO may actually be killed off, or whatever the droid equivalent of that is. Remember, in The Phantom Menace, he was essentially born. It would be a little poetic to have 3PO die in the very final episode of the Skywalker saga. Again, they may simply be hoping to use that as, to try to get some hype for the movie, but it would actually be kind of poetic that basically we've seen these 9 movies kind of from 3PO's perspective. He's been an observer just like us. He was, as I said, essentially born in the first episode, and goes offline in the last. It'd be sad, but again, if the Skywalker saga is over, then presumably they're done with the 3PO character anyway. So I'd admit it sort of fits, whether or not they actually go through with that or not. And here's probably the second most hated scene, the space horses. They actually look like razorbacks, just kind of horse-shaped warthogs, apparently running down a Death Star that's in mid-flight. It's possible this is still in an atmosphere, although I remind you, you don't have to be that high up for oxygen to start to thin. Or it could be for some reason there's an oxygen field around the ship. But yeah, most everyone hates this scene, especially because, not only because it's kind of stupid, but it's very evocative of the space horse scene from the last Jedi. And reminding people about that film is not a good idea. So again, this appears to possibly, I'm pretty sure, is the ruins of the Emperor's throne room. You had this sort of TIE fighter cockpit-looking window in the back. There seems to be a broken throne in front of it. This, I do think, is indeed the ruins of the Death Star. Regardless if the seawall or the Star Destroyer graveyard are, in fact, also Death Star ruins, this one, I think, absolutely is a Death Star, ruins of the Death Star here, absolutely. Now, I don't think this is the Death Star. Seems awfully intact. But this scene shows Rey and Kylo Ren destroying what appears to be a statue or some sort of edifice of the Emperor. They seem to be doing it together. It's possible that both of them are investigating the Emperor's base, wherever this Emperor has been. Again, I don't know if this is the original Emperor, if it's a clone Emperor, if maybe there is no Emperor and someone's faking being the Emperor, holograms, robotics, and smoke and mirrors. I don't know. But this is presumably the base where the Emperor has been hiding all this time. And I have the feeling that both of them are probably kind of, reluctantly teaming up to investigate it or something, Enemies forced to become allies temporarily. Again, another shot of the space scene with the space horses running down, presumably as one of the Star Destroyers in this scene. I do love the original Star Destroyer, so I do love their look. And you can see there's a whole gigantic fleet of them. This is presumably the Death Star tech ones. You can kind of see it looks to be a large laser cannon slung underneath some of them. Again, it's kind of silhouetted, not very easy to see. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if it takes several Star Destroyers to combine their firepower to actually use the Death Star tech. Regardless, the Space Horse is running down. That's just stupid. And this is apparently the Emperor. He appears to be in a mobile throne life support chair of some kind. A lot of people think it's hovering. I'm actually inclined to think it's probably on a walker. Again, the nostalgia factor. If you recall in The Phantom Menace, the Numenorians of the Trade Federation were talking to a hologram of Darth Sidious that was on a walking platform, kind of droid mechanical device. Wouldn't be surprised if this throne chair is built to resemble that. And he seems to be confronting Rey here. And that was the last significant scene. Again, there were a couple scenes I skipped over, but there really wasn't much to say, or they were just continuations of previous scenes. Like I said before, there's really no hype for this movie. No one's really interested in seeing it, despite Disney's best efforts. This trailer even has come out really late, but this is because of the many reshoots that the movie is supposedly undergoing. I don't know the truth of these rumors or not. I am inclined to believe them, considering that Disney has essentially made the mistake of having J.J. Abrams run this movie again. And after the disaster he made of The Force Awakens, yeah, he probably will make a better movie than Rian Johnson did. But to be honest, almost anybody could make a better movie than Rian Johnson did for that Star Wars movie. I actually have no intention of going to see this movie. I did not watch the other two movies in theaters. I did later watch them on TV while I did other things, and that was mostly just to be aware of what was going on so that I knew what the story was. But I did not go to the theater. I did not buy a ticket. I did not watch it when it came out. I have no intention of watching this movie when it comes out either. I will probably eventually put it on once it comes out to video or streaming, or, whatever. And I'll probably watch it then, again, while I do other things. In fact, I missed the casino scene almost entirely in The Last Jedi, and actually had to rewatch it slightly because I was not paying attention. It was that boring. So if you want to go and see it, certainly, if you have nothing else better to do. But myself, I am going to take a pass, and I will not blame you if you do the same. Regardless, thanks for listening, and I hope to speak with you again.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shore of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the darkness.